We decided to ask Grok, the AI built by Elon Musk's company XAI, a very simple question. Who actually built the pyramids? Not who gets credit for them, not who the tour guides say built them, but who the physical evidence says built them. We expected a fast, generic answer. What we got instead was a long, carefully reasoned response that pulled together satellite data, muon detectors, and ancient labor records, and modern engineering analysis into a single picture. And the answer wasn't shocking because it revealed some hidden secret about aliens or lost civilization. It was shocking because of how much real, verifiable evidence there already is sitting in plain sight. Evidence most people have simply never been shown all at once. That is what this video is actually about, not a conspiracy. A pile of evidence so large and so specific that when an AI system lays it out end to end, it reads like something out of a thriller, except every part of it is real and every part of it can be checked. Here's the first thing worth understanding before we get into what the AI actually said. Large language models like Grok do not have secret access to hidden archives. They are not plugged into some classified NASA database of pyramid scans. What they do is read an enormous amount of published material, scientific papers, satellite survey reports, museum records, translated inscriptions, and then synthesize it into a coherent answer faster than any human could. So when Grok gives an answer about who built the pyramids, it is essentially doing what a very well-read research assistant would do if you gave them every peer-reviewed paper in Giza and asked them to summarize it in 5 minutes. The value isn't that the AI knows something new. The value is that it can pull together scattered evidence that normally lives in dozens of separate academic journals and museum databases into one place, and that is exactly what made this answer worth making a video about. So let's start where the evidence actually starts, which is not with mystery, but with names. Inside the Great Pyramid, deep in the relieving chambers above the King's Chamber, there are painted marks left by the work crews who quarried and placed the stone blocks. These aren't decorative, they're graffiti, in the most literal sense, quick red ochre paint marks identifying which crew moved which block, and sometimes even boasting about which team was faster. One of the most famous reads, roughly as Friends of Khufu, believed to be the name of one of the work gangs. This is not a folk legend, passed down through oral tradition. It is paint on stone, buried inside a structure that nobody entered again for thousands of years, put there by the actual people doing the actual lifting. When Grok was asked about authorship, this is one of the first things it pointed to, because it is about as close to a signature as you can get from a civilization that left no diaries. Then there's the workers' village, excavated just south of the Sphinx, starting in the 1990s. This wasn't a slave camp. In the way popular imagination often assumes, archaeologists found bakeries capable of producing thousands of loaves of bread a day, breweries for beer, which was a dietary staple, not a luxury, and cattle and sheep bones, showing the workforce was fed meat regularly, something reserved for a valued labor force, not a disposable one. They found dormitories organized in a way that suggests rotating crews rather than a permanently enslaved population, and in a nearby cemetery, they found something even more telling. Skeletons with healed bone fractures, broken limbs that had been set and allowed to mend before the person went back to work. That detail matters more than almost anything else in this story because a broken leg on a slave who is considered disposable typically doesn't get treated. It gets replaced. A broken leg on a valued worker gets set in a splint and given time to heal. The bones themselves are making an argument about how these people were regarded by the society that employed them. On top of the physical evidence, there is a written record. Administrative papyri discovered at Wadi al-Jarf, a Red Sea port site, and dated to the reign of Khufu himself, describe in granular bureaucratic detail the movement of limestone blocks by boat, the names of the officials overseeing delivery schedules, and the logistics of feeding and supplying work crews. This is essentially a shipping manifest from the actual pyramid building operation, written by the actual people running it, and it survived nearly intact for 45 centuries. None of this reads like myth. It reads like an enormous state project with a chain of command, a supply chain, a payroll system in the form of rationed food and beer, and a workforce that, while certainly laboring under harsh conditions by modern standards, was organized, fed, and in some documented cases, medically cared for. Now here's where the AI answer got more interesting, because knowing who built the pyramids is a different question from knowing how they achieved what they achieved. And this is where the numbers get genuinely strange, even though the builders themselves are not. The base of the Great Pyramid is level across all 4 sides, spanning roughly 230 meters per side, to within about 2 centimeters. 2 centimeters of deviation across a base wide enough to hold 10 football fields. The tools available to the builders were water-filled trenches to establish a level plane, knotted measuring cords, wooden set squares, and plumb bobs. No lasers, no optical levels, no satellite positioning, and the orientation is even stranger. The four sides of the pyramid align to true geographic north, not magnetic north, which drifts and shifts, but the actual rotational axis of the Earth, with an error of about 3 arcminutes, an amount so small the human eye cannot detect it. Finding true north with that level of accuracy in 2560 BCE required tracking the apparent rotation of stars around a fixed point in the night sky and translating that invisible astronomical reference down into a physical line on the desert floor, then holding that line true across the entire length of construction. Engineers who study this today consistently describe it the same way. Not as impossible, not as evidence of anything other than human effort, but as a level of surveying precision that would be a genuine challenge to replicate today without modern instruments. When you ask an AI system to explain how a Bronze Age labor force achieved tolerances that would make a modern civil engineer nervous, the honest answer isn't a hand wave. It's that these builders had generations of accumulated surveying knowledge, extremely disciplined quality control, and almost unlimited patience because the project itself took over 20 years. Precision like this doesn't require lost technology. It requires an enormous amount of skilled, careful, repeated human effort applied over decades. And the physical evidence for exactly that kind of organized effort is what the workers' village and the shipping records already tell us existed. Grok also brought up something that even a lot of pyramid documentaries skip over, which is how the stone actually got there in the first place. For a long time, this was one of the genuine open questions. Millions of tons of limestone and granite, some of it quarried hundreds of kilometers away in Aswan, needed to travel across the desert to the build site. In 2024, a team led by researcher Emin Ghonem at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington published research in the journal Communications, Earth, and Environment that used satellite radar to detect the buried outline of a long-vanished branch of the Nile River, one that once ran much closer to the Giza Plateau than the river does today. They confirmed the radar findings with physical sediment core samples pulled from underground and found that several pyramid causeways appeared to terminate at what would have been harbor structures right along this now dry waterway. In other words, the Egyptians almost certainly floated a large share of their construction material by boat directly to the build site, then transferred it to land for the final approach. This wasn't a wild guess. It was a hidden river, mapped by satellite, physically confirmed with drilled samples, and it resolved one of the most practical mysteries about pyramid construction. Not by inventing new technology, but by locating a piece of geography that had simply been buried under sand and farmland for thousands of years. Then there's what's actually inside the structure, which is where things get genuinely unresolved, and where the AI answer was careful to separate confirmed science from speculation still being tested. In 2017, an international collaboration called the Scan Pyramids Project, involving universities and research institutions from Egypt, France, Japan, and Canada, used a technique called muon tomography to look inside the Great Pyramid without drilling a single hole. Muons are subatomic particles that constantly rain down from cosmic rays, and they pass through solid stone in measurable, predictable ways, except when they hit open space, where more of them get through. By placing detectors around and inside the pyramid and tracking millions of these particles over months, the team identified a previously unknown void above the Grand Gallery, at least 30 meters long. This was published in the journal Nature, independently reviewed, and it remains the most significant new structural discovery inside the Great Pyramid in over 100 years. Nobody knows exactly what that space is. The researchers themselves were careful to say it could be one large room, several smaller connected spaces, or simply a structural feature built to redistribute weight. That honesty is the whole point. Real science says we found something and we don't fully know what it is yet, and then keeps working the problem instead of filling the gap with speculation. In late 2025, Zahi Hawass, the Egyptologist who has been at the center of Giza research for decades, publicly confirmed something that has genuinely reframed the conversation. Using a combination of muon radiography, thermal imaging, and 3D mapping, his team identified another previously unknown passage, this one roughly 30 meters long, located above the pyramid's main entrance. Remote-operated robots have already been sent in to clean and access parts of this corridor, and Hawass has stated the passage leads to a sealed stone door whose contents will not be revealed until a planned announcement in 2026. He's been very direct about what he expects to find, and equally direct about what he does not expect to find. He has said outright that no extraterrestrial or supernatural explanation is required or supported by any of the evidence his team has examined, and that whatever is behind that door, the human achievement at Giza is extraordinary, enough without inventing anything extra. That is a significant thing for the most senior figure in modern Giza research to say this close to a major reveal. He isn't teasing aliens, he's teasing more evidence of exactly how sophisticated the actual humans who did this were. This is also where the more contested claims come in, and a well-built AI answer has to be honest about the difference between confirmed and unconfirmed. In March 2025, a research team using synthetic aperture radar, a satellite imaging technology originally developed for military reconnaissance, announced they had detected an enormous network of structures beneath the Khufu pyramid, descending to depths of over 600 meters, including cylindrical shafts and large cube-shaped chambers. The presentation drew massive public attention. It also drew serious pushback from geophysicists, who pointed out that this type of radar typically cannot reliably resolve features at anywhere close to that depth through solid limestone bedrock, and that the AI processing pipeline used to generate the three-dimensional images could plausibly be introducing artifacts, meaning shapes the algorithm produces because it was trained to expect them, not because they're physically there. No independent team has replicated these findings using different equipment, and Egyptian antiquities authorities have not confirmed access to or verification of the claimed structures. This doesn't mean the findings are false, it means they are not yet science. In the sense that the scanned pyramid's void discovery is science. One has been peer-reviewed and independently checked. The other is a set of preliminary claims still waiting for that same level of scrutiny. A trustworthy answer to who built the pyramids and what's really down there has to hold both of these facts at once without collapsing the exciting unconfirmed claim into the same category as the boring, rigorously checked one. The last piece of the puzzle, and maybe the most quietly important one, is what AI is actually doing for this field beyond generating headline-grabbing radar images. Egyptologists have an enormous backlog of hieroglyphic inscriptions that have simply never been translated, not because nobody can read them, but because there are more of them than any team of human specialists can process in a reasonable amount of time. Machine learning systems trained on large data sets of known inscriptions and their translations are now doing first-pass readings of newly photographed texts, including administrative records from the pyramid building era itself, the exact kind of documents that describe workforce logistics and material delivery. This doesn't replace the Egyptologist. It compresses a process that used to take weeks down to hours, freeing up actual human expertise for the interpretive work that machines can't do, understanding cultural context, grammar nuance, and intent. It's a slow, unglamorous kind of progress, and it's exactly the kind of thing that never makes a viral headline. But it is quietly accelerating how fast we can read what the ancient Egyptians actually wrote down about themselves. So when you put all of that together, what Grok actually said and what the accumulated evidence actually supports, is not a shocking secret. It's something almost more interesting than a secret, which is a fully documented, physically evidenced, still actively unfolding human achievement. Real people whose names were painted on stone blocks, who lived in a real town with bakeries and medical care, who ran a real logistics operation with shipping records that survived 4,500 years, who used a river that has since vanished and been rediscovered by satellite, and who achieved a level of surveying precision that still challenges modern engineers to explain fully, built this thing with their own hands, using tools we can name and techniques we are still piecing together. The mystery was never really about who built the pyramids. The mystery is about how they pulled it off with what they had. And every year, a slightly different piece of that answer gets uncovered. And whether that's a muon detector finding a hidden void, a satellite finding a buried river, or an AI system finally being asked the right question and pulling 3 decades of scattered research into one coherent answer. The next major reveal is reportedly coming in 2026, straight from the team working inside the pyramid right now. Whatever is behind that sealed door, it's not going to be aliens. Based on everything we actually know so far, it's going to be more proof of exactly how far human ingenuity can go when it has 20 years, an organized workforce, and a reason to build something meant to outlast everyone who built it.